All right, we're on page 53 in the book. What we're going to do is we're going to add 4 of these validators right now. All right? So, like I said, we will add 4 validators. And looking for my notes, so give me a second here. All right, we will add 2 required field validators and 2 range validators. So, going back to the program here, you might want to go to your source. Make sure don't put these in the table, because they don't in the book. All right. So I'm at the end of the table here, and I'm just going to hit enter a couple times. All right. And I'm going to drag out first the required field validator and drop it. All right. And we'll fill it in a couple minutes, and then a range validator. All right. Then I'm just going to go in and put in another required field validator and another range validator. All right. So when I'm done, and I'll pretty these up so you're able to read them in just a second. All right. So I'm just going to take them in order. So I've got the first required field validator out there. Again, it's not that important. You could really name these 1, 2, 3, and 4, but the first one, it's going to be for our interest rate. So I'm going to call this required field validator interest rate. And sometimes people, when they see this, they're like, "Wow, look at how long that control name is." But remember, the IntelliSense will kick in, right? So we don't have to worry about typing all that. The error message that we're going to put in is interest rate is required. And we're going to put in one more thing. You may or may not remember this from before, but we have to put down the control to validate. All right? Which is going to be what do we call that? Text box. Is that annual interest rate? All right. Now, everybody sees how I did that, right? I'd recommend not doing it that way. What I'd recommend is going back into design mode. You have it here like this, and using your properties window and filling it in that way, because it's much easier. Again, if you don't agree, that's fine. All right? But notice there's my control to validate, so all I have to do is click there and I get my list. I don't have to remember what these things are called. The other thing that you might want to do in here that I didn't do is you might want to change the font color. Not that important, but I'm going to make it red like I was doing the other day. All right? So it's where it says interest rate is a required field. Okay, I want the whole thing. For some reason, I had only part of it highlighted, so. Right now, it looks really ugly in here because it looks like these things are all butted up against one another. Now, you'll notice when we go here, if that bothers you, you've got 2 choices. I can either come here and hit enter, or I can go back into my source mode and I can put a BR tag in between each one of these. All right, you can do it either way, but hopefully I didn't screw it up, and that'll pretty it up somewhat. There you go. So now it's interest rate is required, range validator, required field validator, and range validator. Okay? So again, with the first one highlighted, this one, I can drag this over now. So again, required field validator interest rate. And what did I set? The ID, the control to validate, the display I really should set. Remember, it's by default. Do you remember this from the other day? The display is either static or dynamic. Static means show it all the time. Dynamic means only show it when you need to. It's always recommended that you choose dynamic. All right. We set the error message, and I also set the for color. I don't think there's anything else that was set in there. All right. Now, would you agree that probably that for every one of these controls, we would want to do this a similar kind of thing? We'd want to have an error message, a color, a control to validate, etc. So when we get into talking about themes, hopefully you'll see why you create themes. All right. So that's the first one. Now I'm going to come in here and do the second one. I'm going to go to the range validator. And I'm going to call that range validator, and it's for the annual interest rate. Oops, sorry. All right. Again, what control do I want to validate? I want to validate the text box annual interest rate. All right. Again, I want the display to be dynamic. All right. Again, I want an error message in there, and I want the error message to say something along the lines of interest rate must range from 1 to 20. Again, I can play with my for color if I want to and make it red like I did before. All right. And now please look up on the screen here. Remember this from last time? What's the maximum value? What is it? What did we just put in the error message? 20. What's the minimum value? All right. But remember, the other thing that we must do here is by default the type is set to string. We don't want that set to string anymore. So we want the type set to integer. All right. Now, I'll come right back to it, but look at my source if you would, please. All right, look at my source. I'll hit it, again, put it over several lines so you can see it. Sometimes when you end up doing this stuff, what you end up doing is you do some of the stuff from source mode and some of the stuff from design mode, because it's easier to flip back and forth by just clicking that button. And some people are happy just putting it in source mode. Other people are happy just putting it in design mode. So all this stuff that you see right here, I just set all this, and I set every bit of it through our properties window. Does all that make sense? Again, probably not a bad time to do a file, save my ASPX file. When I go back to design mode, now you can see that the second one is also in red. If I wanted this, remember, right now we don't care. It's going to be ugly. The error messages are going to be ugly. We don't really care. All right, we can always go back and use a CSS class on these later and pretty them up if we want to do that. All right. Now, what's kind of nice here, if I want to do this, please look up on the screen here. If I want to do this, would you agree that pretty much my other required field validator, the other two that are in here, the other required and the other range, they're pretty much the same as this. The only thing I want to change is the ID and the message. So if I want to, I could come in here and just grab all this stuff. If you think that's easier, then do that. All right. I'm just going to manually put it in here. I'm going to go back again to my next control, which is my next required field validator right here. And I'm going to go back again into design mode. So I'm right here. I find it easier typically to work with this. Again, you may or may not agree. So this particular required field validator, this is the required field validator for number of years. So I'm going to call it required field validator number of years. All right. I want to set my control. So my control to validate will now be text box number of years. I again want it to be dynamic. And I'm going to come down to the error message, and I'm going to say number of years is required. All right, I will again come down to my for color and set that to red as I've been doing with the other ones. All right, so going back into source mode and prettying this up so you can see it. don't know if you remember me saying this the other day or not, but again, the order in which you put in these attributes is irrelevant. You can put them in any order you want to. All right. Then finally, I want to add one more thing in my range. This range, the years they decided to use in here was 1 to 45. Okay. So again, with my range validator highlighted, I'm going to go back again into design mode and do the same stuff. So this is range validator, number of years. All right. Control to validate, again, will be the text number of years. Display will again be dynamic. For color will again be red. Maximum value this time is 45. Minimum value is 1. The type, again, is integer. And I believe that's everything. So if I, again, flip back into source mode, what I'm showing you now, you don't have to do this. But to me, especially when I'm trying to debug, it's much easier to have this stuff line up, as Doug Tabbitt would say, like little soldiers. But if you don't agree, you don't have to do it. I'm doing it so it's easier for you to see what I've done. All right, so that should be everything now. All right. Now, I think you'd all agree with this. If I do a file save, what's that? I didn't? Okay, thank you. So I'll come back and do that. But let's do that first then. Thank you. So let's go back into design mode and the error message. You're right. Years must be, I guess must range from is what they say in the book, must range from 1 to 45. All right, so now that's done. Probably screwed this up as far as the way it looks, but that's not even a big thing one way or the other. All right, nope, there it is. Now, without putting any code in yet, if I come in and I do a save and I come back and I run this, again, it's not pretty, but it's functional. Oh, I think see that message? We got to change that. Remember what I said the other day? We're going to go into NuGet in just a second and add this. What did we say this stuff uses to actually do its validation? Anybody remember? It's jQuery. We don't have the jQuery stuff loaded. All right? So that's what we're going to do next. And if you look in your book, it's page 56 in the book. So let's go back and take a look at what's in the book, and then we'll do it. All right. It says ASP.NET 4.5 has a new feature called unobtrusive validation that you need to be aware of. Bottom line is, what it's saying is, if unobtrusive validation is set to true, you're telling the system to automatically set up jQuery for you to do the validation. If you set it to false, what you're saying is you're going to put code in there yourself to do the validation. All right, bless you. And then they explain what jQuery is, etc. And then they explain the problem that we have. The benefit, as it says, of using unobtrusive validation is that it will reduce the amount of JavaScript that has to be generated because it'll make the calls to the jQuery library for you. That's the good news. The bad news is, since we started with an empty website, unobtrusive validation is enabled, so it's true, but we don't have the jQuery library because we didn't add it. So they say one way that you can get that is to use NuGet, which is a Visual Studio feature. It says the other way is to disable the validation. Well, we don't want to do that because we actually do want to use it. So we're going to go in and use NuGet. So this is what we're going to do in just a second. And please look, if you've already started, fine, but no biggie. But when we get it, when we get to this screen that you'll see in a minute, you'll come up here. If you look at what's in blue up here where I'm whipping the mouse back and forth, you have to search for the package you need. This is a library. NuGet is a library. So you basically have to tell it the package you need. It'll search for it, And when you find it, you basically just tell it to add that package. All right? So that's what we're going to do. So it says here how to install the NuGet package for jQuery validation. All right, so we're just going to follow the steps. All right, you can do them, and then I'll do it when you get done. It says right-click on the project name. You know what that means already. That means, again, I want to stop this run. Stop that. Stop that. But what they're saying in English is, again, what you're going to want to do here is you're going to want to come in and right mouse click on the project name. Well, I can't even see my project name right now because my properties window is pretty big. So I want to right mouse click on it. All right. And after that, it says you want to right mouse click and select Manage NuGet Packages. Well, I'm looking in here. Manage NuGet Packages for Solution. Everybody see that? So I'm going to click on that. Operation failed. Not a good sign. All right. What's that? Just try clicking on it from there. Try the top one then where it says Solution Localhost right here. Try that one. And choose Manage NuGet Packages for Solution. Oh, I didn't like that either. All right. So try that. And it's funny, last semester mine worked and no one else did. So now some of yours are working and some of them are not working. So we're going to see if we can fix this right now. Now I'm going to try doing a save all on here, and I'm just going to throw it right there and see if that mattered. And it did. I had to do a save all first on it. All right. When you do a save all, it's going to save your solution, and it's going to bury it. I just leave it there. It shouldn't matter. You shouldn't have to. I found that if you grab that solution file and you put it right in your regular folder, it screws stuff up. I right-clicked on the one that said CH2 future value. All right, and I just choose Manage NuGet Packages from there. All right. Did you get something different than what mine shows? Okay. I really don't think it will matter. Does it? So I'm going now, over here, nothing was showing, so I clicked where it said nuget.org, and it's saying retrieving information. One thing to realize is I think it takes all this stuff and it does the equivalent of zipping it, all right, until you need it. So now what we're doing is we're telling it we need it. All right. So we want to search in here, and it says to search online, and it says the one that we're supposed to search for is ASP.NET.ScriptManager.jQuery. And lo and behold, see what it found? I did it all in lowercase. It really and truly shouldn't matter. In fact, you might even be able to just put jQuery in there. I don't know. I just put all of it in. Now I'm going to click install. Problems with that? All right, maybe you're even ahead of me. That's fine. So it's installing it. Shouldn't be a problem with the install. I know last year when we got to this point with everybody, there wasn't any kind of problem with it. All right. I should be able to close this now. And see what it put in here? There's my scripts folder. Ready to see it? Now I'll know real quick when I do a file, save all, and I run it again, if I don't get an error message. Something worked that didn't work before, right? All right. Now, we don't have this stuff in yet, but notice if I click calculate, I do get my interest rate is required and my number of years is required. And notice if I come into the interest rate and I put in here 444, a number of years I put in here 444, it gives me my other messages. So with no code, we've already been able to test that stuff and it works. All right, that's a good sign. Now, a couple more things. If you look up on the screen here, I'm going to jump up to page 58, and this has got the code. This is pretty much the code that we've been putting in. But rather than having you start on that, we just manually did it. The only thing that's different, at least on mine, because I was tweaking with the table and going back and forth, is not only do I have an auto style 1 and an auto style 2, but I have an auto style 3. If I know I'm not going to use it, I can just remove it from up there. But all the code is shown here in your book in figure 214, which is on page 59. So you might want to go and take a look and see if indeed that code that you have in there is correct. All right. The completed thing is on page 61 in the book. Am I right? Am I right in assuming that we've gone over this stuff that's in here enough that you understand the stuff that's in here? Am I right in assuming that? Because we did talk about it. He puts some default values in. He puts the default value in for the text box of 6%. We didn't do that, but we could have. All right. Notice with the required field validators, if you would take a look up here, please. Notice I put BR tags after all of them. That's why that stuff is separated. But if you only put one in between the two, only one of those two is going to be correct, right? In other words, either you left it blank, so the required field validator is going to kick in, or you put in something out of range for each one of these. So if I go back to my code and where I put in all of those break tags, if I change it so I don't have a break tag after my first required field validator, so I get rid of this one. So if I get rid of that one and I keep the next one, all right, that break tag, but for my next one, I get rid of that one there. So I've gotten rid of 2 out of my 3 required field validators. I'm just showing you this because now when I run it, notice my error messages are together. All right, and again, if I put something in out of range, they're still together. Okay, so we've got all that done. So all that's left is this gets us up to page 62 in the book. All right, on page 62 in the book, they talk about how to use the C code editor. And guess what? You pretty much use the C code editor the same way that we used it for C# when we were in the 142 class. Really not any differences. So I'm not going to go over that stuff. You could take a look at it when you get time. Again, if you want to do the code snippet, you could do that too, to take a look at that. But I'm not going to do that right now. Page and control events, well, again, everybody, if you'd all just look up here for a second, this is maybe the most important part of this lecture. All right, I mentioned this the other day, that there literally are scores of events that fire. You're going to see some of the stuff that I mean in Chapter 5, all right, when we run a trace on the program. But notice there's an init, there's a load, and there's a pre-render. All right? These are 3 of the events that fire all the time. If you don't put any code in any of them, you really don't know that they're firing. But in the init, as it says, it's the page init. Notice, because this is the important part, the event is raised before the view state of the page controls has been restored. So if you want some initialization, that doesn't sound right, but if you want to do some initialization, you want to make sure it's done before anything happens, you can put it in the init method. Load is what it says. A page is requested from the server after all controls have been initialized and the view state has been restored. What that means in English is you do an init before you do a load. All right, so if you've got some special initialization code you want to have done, you probably want to put it in init and not in load. That's what they're saying. And then pre-render. All of the control events have been processed, but the HTML has not been sent back to the browser. So there's a whole cycle of events that you go through in here, and they're only showing you 3 of them. All right, there's a lot more. Now these common control events, you've seen this stuff last semester. There's nothing new in there. There is nothing new in there. You know what a click is. If you want to change something every time you enter something or remove something from a text box, you can use text changed. If you want to do something every time you either click or unclick a checkbox, it's check changed. All right, same with radio buttons. And if you're working with drop-down lists and list boxes, it's selected index changed. All right. So the actual code for this, we've already gone over this before. But the code is in your book on page 67. There's all the code. I already showed it to you last time, and I'm going to key it in, but I'm going to go back to here, and now I don't want to bring up my CS file. I want to bring up my ASPX file. I want my ASPX.cs file. All right? Pardon me? Yeah, the good question. The question was, please take a look up here. Kind of important, I guess. Yeah. But if you look up here, if I go back into ASPX and I go to design mode, if I want to be able to put something in my calculate, I can double click on it. There it is. I think that's what you were asking, right? And in the same way, I could do the same kind of thing. Double click on clear, and there's my clear stuff. All right. So I'm just going to add the code in here. But notice there is page load, but there's nothing in it. So I'm going to add the page load code that you see on page 67. I'm going to add the calculate code that you see, the button clear, and then I have to write my own calculate future value event. I'm going to do all that, and I've got, 22 minutes now to do it. Should be plenty of time. I'm going to do that, save it, run it, make sure it works, and then save this out to the folder with today's date on. Everybody cool with that? And I'd like you to do the same, because then what we've done is albeit that we've done a lot of copying, but you've created a simple application, a simple one page that has put in simple validation controls, had a drop-down list, had a bunch of text boxes, and we ran it, and hopefully everybody will get theirs to work. All right? Question? What's the problem that you're having with it? What does it say? Well, sometimes, not always, but sometimes when you get that error, make sure the program wasn't already running when you tried to run it again. That's the easiest way to get that error. All right. All right, let me put the code in, and give me about 5 minutes. I'll put the code in, and I'll come over there and we'll take a look at it if John can't help you with it in the interim. Remember, if you're going to put in the same code, if you look up on the screen here, if you're going to put in the code from the book, if you use my naming conventions, it's not DDL, it's drop-down list monthly investment. All right. Okay, there's that. Calculate. No, you don't have to. Like I said, I was more concerned with us successfully creating a project. If you want to, you can, but that's totally your call. Oh, everybody see the error I made? What's that error? I made interest rate I made it an integer. All right, so if you do want to be able to put decimal places in there, you're going to have to change the type. My error. Apologize. There you go. That'll happen. Didn't write the clear yet. It's sort of that, but even more than that, it's the old adage, and you've heard this before, we've always done it that way. And they don't have a lot of forward-thinking people here that are willing to think outside of the box and say, just because we've always done it that way doesn't mean we should. And part of it's what you said, though. Part of it is job security, too. So. But the problem that you get in education is that a lot of the people who get into it, I don't even mean instructors, but a lot of the people who work over in the other office, they've been here for years. So, and some of them, I mean, literally, they'll come here at 20 and they'll retire at 65. So other people come in while they're here, So other people who might come in with new ideas don't get a chance to actually bring in those new ideas. And then the cycle continues and it continues and it continues. I know that Tammy went in and like she's gone in and learned SharePoint by herself and redid the whole Blackhawk, the page for our division. You know, and she's very unique in that way because most people don't do that. Yeah. No, it's -1 if you don't want anything selected. All right. In the book, they show 0, meaning that it'll always be set. Yeah, and it'll always, you know, so it'll always be set, and it'll always be set to when you clear it, it'll set it to 50. We could set it to -1. We could do that. I don't want that here's to be 0. The text. Yes, there's a lot of different ways. Again, you're right. Everything you guys have said is right. There's a lot of different ways that it could be done. Sure. That's done. I think my formula is wrong though. Because when I did it, it didn't give me the same answer as what was in the book, so I want to check that. Investment decimal in years in I didn't put code in here that's wrong, but in the book, when they show 50, it gets 82, 34, 94, which is what I had the last time I did it, but I'm trying to figure out what I've done differently. It's working, but it's not giving me the correct answer, and I quickly looked at the formula, and I didn't see anything that was an error in the formula. I just want to make sure that before I put it out there, that what I put out, there you go, not I plus plus. I plus equals 50. That's one thing. That's wrong. I don't know if that'll matter or not, but we'll try it. No, that's 6. is lab in Java. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to again save everything. And I'm going to close the solution, and I'm going to save mine out there. Oh, yeah, it's not debugging. And it still appears to have an error. I'm going to try to look at it, but I'm eating my way for lunch, so I'll try to look at it after the break. The last thing I'm going to mention to you is this. And I'd like somebody, if you would, to wager a guess at this question. All right, that I'm about to ask. And the question is, let's say that that Kelly grabs this, my copy, copies it over, puts it on his desktop, runs it. Okay, everybody with me? Number one, will it run? Number two, why or why not? I'm not saying is the output right, but will it run, and why or why not? Not all at once, though. It won't run. Why? Remember when I had to do the save all? It saved it in my directory with JScott on it, so that's where my solution file is. All right, so we may have a problem with that stuff. The code will be correct. I'm looking through it, but if somebody has a chance, and I'll look at it after lunch too. All right, but my code looked correct as far as I could tell, but when I put in those values, I didn't get what they got in the book. On Thursday, the chapter is no longer than this one, but part of the chapter, again, is this is CSS. I'm not going to show you that, but I'm going to show you the tools that are available in Visual Studio for you to work with CSS. You can choose to use them or not use them. That's your call.